Yo, what's good everyone? It's been a while. I've been busy at home, so I took a little break, but I'm back and it's nice to return with a meta character in Escoffier. Let's look at her kit's builds and teams. Escoffier is one of the easiest characters to play in the game. Press her skill and she's gonna deal big off-field cryo damage on tick. Her burst is gonna heal the team for a big initial amount and then smaller amounts to the on-fielder on tick. Her passive shreds the opponent's resistance to cryo and hydro depending on how many cryo or hydro units there are in the team. If there's 1, she shreds by 5%, 2, she shreds by 10%, 3, she shreds by 15%, and 4, it jumps up a lot and she shreds by 55%. C'est incredible! Even though you don't strictly have to run 4 hydro or cryo units, it is heavily incentivized to get that full 55%. For pros and cons, her skill damage is a big positive. Off-field cryo units just don't deal much damage. Escoffier changes that, becoming our first off-field cryo damage dealer whose damage isn't completely copium. Another good thing about her is that she can solo sustain teams, even with Farina bleeding the team. Her resistance shred from her talents is so big that she genuinely makes cryo teams competitive with some of our strongest teams of other elements. Her base damage and healing is so good too that even without reaching the full 55% shred, she's just a good option to drop into any team where you need a flex. Her disadvantages are that while she doesn't need Farina, her teams are significantly weaker without her, which is a shame because we already have so many units that lean heavily on Farina. I feel if she shredded Electro resistance instead of Hydro for example, she'd have a lot more team options. Hydro just keeps getting stronger, which isn't necessary. Also, her passive encourages freeze teams, but boss enemies can't be frozen. Surely a rework to the reaction would have been better than releasing a character to work around it? Money talks, I guess. And her final disadvantage is that she's French. In terms of weapons, her signature will obviously be best. It's an interesting weapon because it gives Escoffier crit damage and attack, which helps her damage dealing capabilities, but it also gives attack to whichever characters she heals. This makes it a good option for other polearm healers too, like Yao Yao, Mika, Chevruz and Yansan. As far as I'm aware, we don't have a buff in polearm, making this the first. If I'm wrong though, let me know in the comments and I'll pin it. Calamity Queller's her next best option. Homer's a good choice. Deathmatch is a nice 4-star option. Free-to-plays could even choose between the 5.4 event weapon and Favonius Lance. The 5.4 event weapon gives Escoffier more damage. Favonius Lance gives her more support potential with the particles. An interesting weapon is Prospector's Drill. I don't imagine too many people have an R5 lying around with it being a rare gacha weapon, but if you do, it has an attack secondary stat and it gives up to 21% attack and 39% elemental damage to Escoffier from the passive. C'est magnifique! For artifacts, Golden Troop's going to be best for her damage. Blizzard Strayer gives a lot of crit rate though, 40% against frozen enemies but still 20% against enemies affected by cryo even if they're not frozen. She does ascend with crit rate, so going 4-piece Blizzard Strayer along with a cryo resonance means she's already looking good for crit rate, so if you go for that, be careful you don't overcap. I'm going Golden Troop. It's in my strongbox and I've just been throwing all my fodder from the new domain in there. Now for my favourite part of the video, let's channel our inner Escoffier and start cooking some delicious teams. It's worth pointing out Escoffier's best teammate will be Farina. There's no way around it. Escoffier is designed for Hydro and Cryo teams and Farina's our best Hydro off-fielder. That's not to say you have to run her with Farina, we'll look at alternatives, but just be aware of the fact that it's not my fault you're going to see her a lot in these teams. Starting with a character that doesn't need more teammates whatsoever but seems to get them all the time anyway, let's look at Neuvillette. Prior to 5.1, people running with Farina, Kazuha and Zhongli. Xiaolonin in 5.1 replaced the comfort of Zhongli's shield with healing, big buffs and even more resistance shred. Seat Lally in 5.3 gave us a bit of that interruption to resistance back while still retaining the scroll buff as well as her own resistance shred. Escoffier, rather than replacing the sustain unit, would be another sustain that instead replaces Kazuha. You lose around 40% elemental damage as well as 40% shred from VV and one of the elements for Neuvillette's charge attack buff in his passive. You gain 55% shred to both Hydro and Cryo, another source of big damage, more healing for fanfare stacks as well as the Cryo resonance for crit rate. With all these new characters for Neuvillette, I don't imagine it will be raining in Fontaine anytime soon. Another Fontaine character getting a buff is Wraithsley. Hoyo have slowly been letting him out of the Fortress of Meripede. First, he got 2 new teammates in Mawika and Seatlally, then he got a rerun, now he's got another teammate and with it, a new team archetype. He's best in melt teams, but with the introduction of Escoffier, Freeze is a strong option for him. It's less restrictive to him that you don't have to worry about elemental application. He is still bound by the unwavering shackles of being French though. Sticking with cryo DPSs, we've got Ayaka flexing those wet grippers. In terms of damage dealing on paper, Ayaka's strongest team is going to be Escoffier, Farina and Shenhe. She's a long forgotten character, but it's nice to see her getting some love. Her story quest and the music in that dancing scene are nostalgic for me. Honestly, I'd say Inazuma's launch was Genshin's peak in terms of hype and player interest. Escoffier gives us a nice throwback to that. I will say though that while this team performs well on paper, people might be overlooking Kazuha's value. Ayaka's burst is going to be dealing a lot of damage, but not if it's not hitting enemies. Kazuha helps a lot with that. Imagine you using this team for the second half of the Abyss. You work through your rotation, pop Ayaka's burst, and whatever it is you're fighting against moves out of it. If you reset the chamber, you have to play the first half again. Fuck the shit out of that shit. If she does keep her burst on the enemy though, it'll be strong. Yelan's going to be another character that pairs well with Escoffier. Yelan, Farina and Escoffier is such a strong trio that you can pretty much put any unit as an on-fielder and you'll be good. Ayato will work. Child could too if you manage his cooldown properly. Maybe get Chongyun in there to reduce the cooldown. If you're a regular to this channel, you already know we're finding a way to get Candice in there. I don't care that a percentage of the team's DPS is lower than the others. Candice is on field. Being Candice, beautiful as always, that's all that matters to me. With Escoffier being a chef, I think it's only right we start cooking some off-meta stuff. Keeping Candice in there as an off-field support, we could use her for a Hydro infusion for physical units with big damage normal attacks like Eula. She's cryo, so she allows Escoffier to hit the 55% shred. Fremine could be used in a similar way too. I know a lot of the fanbase appreciate some Cave content, so you'll be pleased to know he's getting some love. Running him with Escoffier, Farina and Yelan means we have a lot of off-field damage, 2 units in Farina and Yelan, both buffing Cave, plenty of Hydro and Cryo application for Freeze, and then Cave comes in with the heavy hits for Shatter. Obviously, Shatter scales off Elemental Mastery, which just so happens to be what Cave's damage scales off, and Shatter got a small buff in 5.2. Any bloom damage you deal is a bonus here. Not the strongest Escoffier team, but definitely one of Cave's strongest. It might be worth giving him a go in the Abyss if Alhaven's not busy having a go in his Abyss. Is Ito in Escoffier's strongest teams? No. Is she in one of Ito's strongest? Honestly, I'd put this up there with his Mono Geo variants. Pairing him with Farina gives him big value, but finding an optimal healer is an issue. You can run Bennett, but Ito already gets so much attack from his burst. Shalonen means you have to drop the Geo support. Escoffier is a nice option for extra damage and a little bit of Hydro Shred for Farina, although she'll only shred 10% rather than the full 55% from her passive. Looking outside of Freeze teams, you could run her for off-field melt damage. You lose a lot of the resistance shred, but you gain the melt multiplier and the ability to use some other units. If you go with Emily and Bennett for the burning aura, you can use any Pyro or Dendro on-fielder. Arlecchino or Mawika are strong choices. I'll definitely be trying Dia. Regulars know I'm a big fan of her. Kanich is an option too, but maybe consider swapping Emily out for an off-field pyro applicator like Mawika. I'm gonna give Skirk a shout out too. For the 5.3 livestream, we showed Skirk's silhouette as a playable character. The new cryo set looks like it suits Skirk's design, so I think it's safe to assume Escoffier will pair well with her. Nothing's confirmed though, just a thought. Overall, Escoffier is a much needed cryo option. I've seen suggestions that she breaks the balance of the game, but when Melt and Vape exist with plenty of options, I just don't think that's the case. Her teams revolve around a reaction that a lot of the time you can't even trigger. It is a little disappointing though how so many characters lean on Farina, and she's another one. I can't wait to pull her though. I'll be doing a team showcase video as always when she releases, and I'll be dropping an Aoife guide tomorrow. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in them, and au revoir, or adieu, or whatever it is.